You're listening to the Paradigm Shift Podcast.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for episode 2 of the Paradigm Shift Podcast. My name is Alex Sanfilippo. I am the founder of dailyps.com. Today we're going to be covering a trending topic, when you feel like God is silent. We've had a lot of social media comments and discussion on the blog on this topic of God being silent or feeling like God is being silent. So we certainly know this is something that's very relevant for our readers, and we really wanted to cover this on the second episode of the podcast here. So joining me today is our good friend Tiffany Butts. Tiffany, thank you for being here with us. Can you share a little bit about yourself?
Thank you for having me, Alex. I'm a blogger. I've been writing for Daily PS for a little over a year now, and I also have my own blog, TiffanysButts.com, where I share my personal experiences with the Christian faith and with God and the things that I've learned.
That's awesome. I've actually really enjoyed your blog as well. It's one that I've been following for a while, and I like the content that's on there. It's really awesome. So I encourage everyone to check that out as well. We're actually going to have a link to it in the show notes, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But let's go ahead and get started on this topic. When you feel like God is silent, let's get into talking about this. Can you share a time in your life, Tiffany, when you feel like God was silent?
I'm actually experiencing that right now. I'm in a transitional season of life. I recently started a new job. I'm in the process of launching a business. And after a few years of being single, I've recently started dating again. And all of these things are things that I've been praying about for a few years. And throughout the last couple of years, I've heard God speak to me regarding each of these things. I've been praying about starting a business for the last 5 years, and slowly God's given me direction for that. A year ago, when I was looking into changing jobs, He told me not yet. And when it came to starting a new relationship, God made it very clear as to how I should go about it. But within the last 7 or 8 months, I felt like I haven't heard Him say anything to me about any of these topics. And I'm looking for guidance, but all I've been hearing is silence.
So, wow, and that's a lot. So this is actually something that you're still going through. I know it's something you've been through because you've actually written about it on Daily PS's blog, but it's also something you're still going through. That's really cool, and it's definitely something that's relevant, and I think that I've been through in my life in many different times, and I believe a lot of our listeners are feeling the same way about that. So kind of seeing this is something you're still going through now even, what has your response been during this time of your life?
So in the beginning, like at the beginning of the 7 or 8 months, I hate to admit it, but there was a lot of doubt. And with so many new opportunities, I really want to make sure I was making the right decisions and staying in God's will. Don't get me wrong, like I've still been praying and I've still been seeking God, but I've definitely let the doubt and worry get the best of me from time to time. So one thing I've done to stay encouraged is look back on the promises God has given me. I have a journal that I keep where I write down all of the promises I've heard God tell me and all the major revelations I've had. So, for example, last year I was praying about starting a business, and I finally heard God speak to me about the name of the business and what I should sell. And for the longest time, I couldn't figure out what I would be passionate about. I just knew I wanted to start a business. And so that was huge for me. And within the last year of learning about entrepreneurship and marketing and finances, on top of everything else that I have going on, it's been easy to get discouraged and overwhelmed. So looking back on those promises and looking at the quote I have in my room that says, "Remember why you started," that has been a big thing to keep me motivated.
That's cool. I actually really like that quote a lot as well. Remember why you started. And you mentioned journaling in there, which is a great way to remember why you started. You have it written down, you have it logged somewhere that you can go back and see the reason for it. That's something that I do as well, and I definitely encourage everyone listening today, write it down. When God has spoken to you in your life, write it down so you don't forget it later. Oftentimes we feel like God might be being silent in our lives, but maybe it's something He's already told us and we just didn't write it down. We didn't have it in front of us. I think that's really important to remember, and it actually kind of brings up a story in the Bible. I'm thinking back to Joseph. Joseph had a dream that he believed that he was going to be a leader, he was going to be a ruler, and his brothers were going to really basically be working for him at that point. And he didn't see that happen until way later, but he never forgot that promise when he was in prison, when he was in just terrible situations. He didn't forget that promise. He always remembered it. And he just remembered why he started that journey, what brought him there, and it's what helped him stay faithful. I think that's a huge thing to remember. I think that really remembering the promises God has made to us is just so important. I'm really glad you mentioned that, actually. I know that really helps me a lot as well with everything I've got going on in life too. So just moving along to this next question here, if you could go back, let's just say, a few months, 8-10 months even, how would you respond differently to this season that you've been in?
I think the first thing I would do is spend more time with God and pray more often. In the midst of all of this change and pursuing new things, I have let my priorities shift in the wrong direction. I spent more time focusing on the opportunities God gave me rather than focusing on Him. So recently, I wanted to change this, so I completed a fast. I knew I needed to refocus my mind, so in addition to, devoting more time to reading my Bible, praying, and journaling, I also fasted from secular music and any TV or movie show that was above a PG rating. Because we are what we feed our souls, and what we feed our souls affects how we think and how we act. So I wanted to make it a priority not only to draw closer to God through His Word, but to feed my soul with positive, God-glorifying things. And it made a huge difference. I had a spiritual breakthrough this past weekend, and I heard God speak to me about my business, which has felt very stagnant lately, and my new relationship. So it's definitely paid off. God is so faithful to meet us where we are when we seek Him wholeheartedly.
That's good. That's awesome. So you mentioned a PG movie rating. So what kind of movies were you watching?
Things for children,
cool.
mostly.
All right. So what's your favorite Pixar movie then?
Pixar movie, In and Out.
In and Out. Okay. I thought that was good. I liked it. Sorry, back on topic here. So you mentioned 3 things I want to point out here. You mentioned pray more, spend more time in the Word, and fasting. And I think that those 3 things are key to hearing God's voice and to getting through seasons where we're not hearing God's voice. That's how you keep the main thing is by actually just practicing those things that the Bible tells us to do. I think that's so important. And you also mentioned that keeping God above your opportunities is also just as important. The opportunities we get in life, they actually come from God. And you know that, the things that you've gotten in your life and the ideas for your businesses, God was the one who gave you those ideas. So moving those opportunities and things above God, which many of us tend to do, almost says to God, like, you're number 2 now. Like, you kind of gave me this opportunity, but now I'm gonna give you a back seat for a while I go try to achieve these things. And I can understand that, being a high achiever. That's kind of how I'm wired. I want to achieve things when someone puts a goal in front of me. So I could definitely see that being the case, but it's so important to keep God in front of those things, because if God originally gave you the idea, He's also going to be the one to help you through it, to actually see it carried out and to do so really well. So I think that's so important. And those 3 things, again, is to pray more, spend more time in the Word, and fast. I know for myself, fasting's been huge. I'm actually in the middle of a fast right now myself, just to get more clarity from God and make sure that I continue to keep Him above all else. And that's just part of really surrendering to Him. And that's definitely key to hearing God's voice. So I love that you said that. That's really just great. I hope that people are taking notes, listening to this. I know I am. One more question here before we close out. What wisdom from your past experiences can you share with our listeners? What have you been through during this season that you want to share with all of us?
Well, you definitely touched on it when you said we need to keep the main thing. I had this revelation during my fast, and it's a verse in the Bible, but it says, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" And I realized that it doesn't matter if I'm growing my business or I'm starting a new relationship if I'm not growing in God. Like, we all have these God-given desires and these passions, and it's great that they come to reality, and it's great that we find success. But if our relationship with God isn't the priority and we're not growing spiritually, then none of that really matters. So regardless of your situation, if you feel like you aren't hearing from God, my first piece of advice is that you draw close to Him. James 4:8 says, if we draw near to God, then He will draw near to us. I recommend that you just pray and ask God to open your eyes and ears to really see what He's doing and hear how He's speaking to you, because He speaks to us in so many different ways. And sometimes when we put Him second and we don't keep the main thing, there can be so much noise around us that we let in that can drown out His voice. Because God is always with us. He's never far from us. He hasn't moved. And the Word says that He will never leave us or forsake us. He's faithful to meet us where we are when we seek Him first. So that's my advice. Just make sure that you are seeking Him first.
That's so good. Tiffany, thank you again for sharing this wisdom with all of us today. I believe you really covered this topic, when God is silent. I know that it definitely answered a lot of questions that I've had. In closing, I want to encourage all the listeners today just to be faithful wherever you are. Even if you feel like you're not hearing God in your life right now, remain faithful. Press on. Don't give up. Don't doubt God. Don't doubt anything that He's doing in your life. When you're not hearing God, that's the time to press on in a way you never have before. And I promise you that God has greatness in store for you.
For show notes and discussion, visit podcast.dailyps.com. Thank you for listening to the Paradigm Shift Podcast.